Iran fires missiles across the Gulf. Middle East conflict expands. The Middle East has entered one of its most dangerous periods in decades. Tensions between Iran and the United States have escalated dramatically after waves of missile and drone attacks spread across the Gulf region. What began as targeted strikes between rival powers has now evolved into a wider regional crisis affecting multiple countries, global energy markets, and millions of civilians. This rapidly developing conflict has drawn in several nations across the Middle East and raised serious concerns about whether the situation could spiral into a much larger war. The missile strikes across the Gulf. In recent days, Iran launched multiple ballistic missiles and drones toward countries across the Persian Gulf, including targets linked to U.S. military facilities and allied governments. Air defense systems across the region were activated as sirens echoed through major cities. In several cases, missiles were intercepted before reaching their targets, but the attacks sent shockwaves throughout the region. One major incident involved missiles fired toward Qatar, where authorities reported that most of the incoming projectiles were intercepted by defense systems before causing major damage. Some missiles landed in territorial waters or in inhabited areas, preventing casualties but highlighting the serious threat facing Gulf nations. Similar attacks and attempted strikes were reported in the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Jordan, where air defense forces scrambled to intercept drones and ballistic missiles entering their airspace. The scale of the attacks suggests a coordinated strategy to pressure U.S. allies and disrupt military operations across the region. How the conflict began. The current escalation traces back to large-scale strikes carried out by the United States and Israel against military and strategic targets inside Iran. Those strikes were described by Western officials as efforts to weaken Iran's military infrastructure and prevent potential security threats. Iran responded quickly with retaliatory missile and drone attacks targeting Israeli cities and U.S. military assets across the Middle East. Over the following days, the conflict expanded beyond direct Iran-Israel exchanges and began affecting countries across the Gulf. According to reports, missile alerts and drone interceptions have been recorded across several major cities, from Dubai and Abu Dhabi to Bahrain and Kuwait. These incidents demonstrate how quickly regional conflicts can spread when major powers are involved. Impact on Gulf countries. Gulf nations now find themselves on the front line of a rapidly widening conflict. Many of these countries host American bases, making them potential targets during retaliatory strikes. For example, the United Arab Emirates reported hundreds of drone and missile attempts toward its territory during the early days of the escalation. While many were intercepted, debris from intercepted missiles caused damage to buildings and infrastructure in some areas. In other parts of the region, attacks have targeted ports, energy facilities, and strategic infrastructure. These attacks have not only created security risks, but also raised fears of disruptions to the global energy supply. Threat to global energy markets. The Persian Gulf is one of the world's most important energy corridors. Any disruption in the region can affect global oil prices and international trade. As tensions increased, oil markets reacted immediately. Energy traders and governments around the world began monitoring shipping routes and oil production facilities. The conflict has already caused major volatility in oil prices as investors worry about potential disruptions to the flow of crude oil through the region. Shipping companies and airlines have been forced to reroute flights in vessels as the risk of military escalation grows. Civilian fear and regional instability. Beyond the geopolitical consequences, the conflict has deeply affected civilians across the Middle East. Residents in several cities have reported hearing air raid sirens, seeing missile interceptions in the sky, and rushing to shelters during alerts.
Governments across the region have heightened security and activated emergency response systems. Schools, airports, and public infrastructure in some areas have temporarily suspended operations as authorities attempt to maintain safety. For many people living in the region, the fear is not only about the current strikes, but what might come next. The risk of a wider war. Military analysts warn that if the conflict continues to escalate, more countries could be pulled into the crisis. The presence of U.S. bases across the Middle East, along with existing alliances and rivalries, creates a complex web of strategic interests. A prolonged conflict could involve multiple nations, regional militias, and global powers. Diplomatic efforts are underway in various international forums to prevent further escalation and encourage negotiations. However, the situation remains highly volatile, and the coming days will be critical in determining whether the conflict moves toward de-escalation or expands further. Conclusion. The missile strikes across the Gulf mark a dangerous turning point in the confrontation between Iran and the United States. What began as targeted military operations has now grown into a regional crisis affecting several countries and threatening global stability. As the world watches closely, leaders face a difficult challenge, preventing further escalation while protecting their national interests. For now, the Middle East stands on edge, uncertain about what the next chapter of this conflict will bring.